I'm so thankful to be here with you, and I'm thankful that you're here. And it is incredible to be in the house of God. Are you guys excited to be in the house of God tonight? Woo! Me too. Me too. All right. People kept asking or kept saying, I'm excited to hear what God's going to say tonight. And I'm like, me too. We'll figure it out when I'm up there, right? No, I am excited, and it's always an honor to be here with you. My name's Rob, for those of you who didn't know, Rob Bruner, and it is a pleasure for me and an honor for me to be asked to be up here for you, and I don't take that lightly. So I've got a word that God gave me tonight. Honestly, we're in our Bridge Builders series, Bridge Builders BB, right? Cool. So Landon started us off with this on Sunday, and it gave an incredible message. So hopefully you had a chance to hear that on Sunday. If you didn't, go back and listen to it. It's gonna pour into your life, and I get the honor of being able to continue that tonight. And when I heard that we were going to be in our Bridge Builder series, I was like, all right, this is cool, because you know what? I'm a construction guy, okay? And I like bridge building, and the first thing I thought of was like, all right, bridges are expensive. They're all overhead. Man, it took you guys a while. I thought I was being serious. All right. Well, But yeah, it was bad. Sorry. But it also made me think about here, like a couple years ago in Joy's hometown of Pensacola, there was this there was a hurricane, and a bunch of these barges let loose, and they started like flowing out into the water, and they actually did some serious damage to the new Pensacola Bridge out there. And it was like serious damage. And for a long time, I had a hard time getting over it. See, was that one any better? Is that any better? Okay, all right, thank you. I'm getting you warmed up. All right, I see. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I see that. Okay, I like you the best, by the way. For those of you who don't know, I am a construction guy. I teach at NAU, the Northern Arizona University. Yeah, we got some students out there. And so I like to start all my classes with really bad jokes, okay? And I try to get away with it. I try to like sneak it in there, and I'm told I never can get away with it. I always have like a tell. I'm like, so. Yeah, and that's like, everybody knows I'm about to say something really dumb, okay? But I got one over on you guys, so I'm pretty happy with myself tonight. No, but actually, no. I'm not saying another one, okay? Actually, when I heard I was doing the Bridge Builder series, I was excited, and they told me I was going to be speaking about generosity. And I was like, great, I spoke about generosity like 2 years ago. This is great. I'm going to go back and look at that, and maybe I'll use the same one and make it easy on myself, right? And so I go back and I look at it, and God says, nope. Nope, you're not going to use that one. I was like, well, I got a short time period here, God. We better get to work. So, but God gave me a good word to share with you tonight. And I love this verse about giving that I just shared with you. I love it. So for those of you who don't remember, it was Luke 6:38 if you wanted to turn there. And it says, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And so for those of you who don't know what that means, maybe you weren't alive back in Jesus' day. I'm kind of old. But if you weren't alive back then, you might not know what this means. Because right now, when we go to buy grain from the market, we might put it on a scale. And it says, that's a pound, and we pay for a pound. Well, back then, they didn't have scales at the market, so what they did is they gave you a measure. They gave you a scoop of whatever you were buying. And so if you were buying grain, you would want to go to the person who would scoop it up, shake it around, kind of pack it down, overflow it a little bit, and then give it to you, right? Because you're getting more bang for your buck. That makes sense, right? They don't have to do that. That means they were being generous with you. If Sprouts over there started doing that, like by the scoop, I'd be shaking it around when I was buying those chocolate-covered almonds. I mean, whew, I'd be packing it down. Got to get as much as possible. Get as much bang for your buck. But this was how they did that. So in Jesus talking about that, he was saying, be generous. If you're going to give generously. He didn't say just pour the whole grain sack out for them or anything. He just said, if you're going to give, shake it together, press it down, mound it over, have it be overflowing. Because with the measure you give, that measure will be given to you. Now, I want to put you all to rest right now. This is not about money necessarily, okay? Because some of you are out there thinking, well, I don't have a lot of that. And that's okay. This is not just about money. There's other things that you have to give, that God has given you, that God has blessed you with, that you have to give. I mean, you have your time, okay? You have time that you can give. You have your talents that you can give. You have your abilities that you can give, okay? You have your words that you can give. You have your heart that you can give. Guess what? You have love that you can give. We have to give love away. It just doesn't flow out of us. We have to give love. And yes, we have resources that we can give. And yes, we have finances that we can give. But we have a lot that we can give. It's not just money. And so when he's talking about giving generously, he's not just talking about money. And so I want you to be thinking beyond money as we're going through this. It's more than that. And I also want you to remember or to not misunderstand this verse, because it's easy to look at it and say, okay, well, if I give, I get. Well, if I give, I get. This is not a give then get situation here. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Sometimes we can look at that and we say, well, if I give this much, then I'll get tenfold back. Or, if I give over here and then I give more, then God will give me that same measure. So that's why I'm going to give. I want to tell you that right here, Jesus, you know what he's talking about? He's not talking about that. He's talking about your heart. He's talking about your heart behind giving. What is your heart behind giving? Is it because the law says that I have to give 10%, and if I give 10%, I'll be blessed? That's not the right heart. It's not, well, if I give and I give more, then God has promised to give me tenfold. No, that's the wrong heart. But if you say, well, I want to give because God's leading me to give. And I know that he'll multiply it and he'll do incredible things with it. And he's going to do things that I don't even know, but he's going to bless somebody with it. That's the heart. Not saying that God's not going to bless you for giving, but that's the wrong heart if that's why you're giving. Okay? And I'm not even talking just about money now. What if they ask you to volunteer in church? What if Taylor says, man, you can play the guitar? Whew. We need you, right? What about it? And you're like, well, I just don't have that much time. I don't have a whole lot of time. Well, God's asked us to be generous. So just be thinking about that as we go through this, because it's about the heart. That's the heart of Jesus, right? Jesus was a giver. And so my very first thing that I want to talk to you about is to be generous, you have to be a giver. Okay? So that just goes hand in hand. You have to be a giver to be able to be generous. And so the very first thing we need to start off with is be a giver. Jesus was constantly giving. And so we have a great example. But guess what? Jesus wasn't walking around handing out $100 bills or denarii or whatever they called it back then. He wasn't, because he didn't have a lot of that, right? But he was giving all the time. Throughout his entire ministry, he was giving. What was he giving? He was giving time. He was giving his abilities. He was giving his talents. He was giving his wisdom all the time. He was giving wisdom when people didn't know he was giving wisdom. He was sharing wisdom. He was dropping wisdom all the time, okay? And he was giving love. He was giving forgiveness. He was giving salvation. And ultimately, he was giving his life. Jesus gave everything. Everything. So we talk about shaken and pressed down. Jesus shook down, pressed it, and then he like mounded over the top. Like he basically emptied out the storehouses of heaven's grain on top of us, and at the cost of his life. Jesus was a giver, okay? And so we have a great example of being a giver. But I had to ask myself this question, and I don't know if you've ever asked yourself this question because it's almost like one of those understood things, but why was Jesus so generous? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Why was Jesus so generous? You know, he actually didn't have to be. Jesus could have chosen to come down to earth as a king, as a ruler, as somebody who just lorded over everybody and showed his glory to everybody in a different way. He had that choice. Why did he choose to come as a giver, as somebody who just served and gave his life? It's a question I think we all need to think about and we need to answer. Because he gave and he gave and he gave. John 3:16. God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. He gave. He gave his son. He gave everything. Why did he give? Why was he generous? And this is a really important question to answer. Jesus was generous because he was making a connection between God and man. He was bridging the gap between the Heavenly Father and creation. Somehow that gap had to be bridged. And the generosity of what Jesus did for us, the generosity of Jesus dying on the cross for our sins, is the generosity that bridged the gap between us and God. It's all generosity. Jesus' generosity was the foundation for the connection that we have with God. We follow that lead. Generosity is the foundation of connection. Okay, I want you to remember that. I want you to write that down. Generosity is the foundation of connection. That's important to understand because why is Jesus telling us to be generous? Well, maybe he wants us to bridge a gap. Maybe he wants us to make a connection between this and this. And that's exactly where we're going with this. Number 2, we need to be generous. We need to be generous. We need to give and we need to be generous because generosity is what bridges that gap. As many of you know, I'm a builder. I already told you that. I was a builder for a lot of years before I started teaching, and then I now teach construction management at the NAU. And that's a little jab at the Arizona, but the University of, whatever. Just in case you're from there, I just wanted to offend somebody tonight. Every time I got to offend at least 2 people. Okay, so if that was just one, I might still be offending a few. But I'm a builder, and I was in construction for a lot of years, and now I am a teacher. And so a lot of times when I read the Bible, God speaks to me in building terms, okay? I know that's kind of weird, but it's kind of like King David, okay? I'm not saying I'm like King David, okay? But it's kind of like King David. You know, so Psalm 23, King David wrote Psalm 23. He was a shepherd, and so God spoke to him as a shepherd. And it says, you know, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside quiet waters. You know, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's all about being a sheep and a shepherd. Well, so God seems to do that. He kind of speaks to us in familiar ways. And so God spoke to David as a shepherd. He spoke to me as a construction guy. So bear with me, because tonight I'm going to give you a little construction lesson, if that's okay. All right? Okay? So I know we got some construction management students out there tonight. Shout out to you. But take notes, okay? But I'll say it again, generosity is the foundation for connection. Our purpose here at Bridge Church, I don't know if you know this, but our written purpose here at Bridge Church is to bridge the gap between the church and our community. Do you know that? It's to bridge the gap between our church and our community. That's our purpose here at Bridge Church. And generosity is how we do that. We do that. We bridge that gap with generosity, because generosity is the foundation. And when I read this passage about generosity, where we shake it together and we press it down, I started to think about bridge building. And I started to think about, okay, well, what holds up a bridge? Well, the foundations and the columns hold up bridges. And then, man, God was leading me on some rabbit trails, all down these rabbit trails. But I want to talk to you about the columns of a bridge, because without a column, the bridge is not up there. We can't span from one side to the other. We can't span from the church to the community without that bridge deck. And the thing holding up that bridge deck is those columns. Okay, and so talking about those columns, when the first thing we do when we build a concrete column is we put formwork around rebar. Okay, I told you this is going to get deep. All right, I was thinking about bringing a whiteboard up here, but I just didn't have time. We put formwork around the rebar. Okay, and that formwork is made of wood and steel, and it's strong because it has to hold all of that concrete until that concrete sets up, and we remove it so that it can support the bridge deck. Okay, that makes sense. And so the thing is, we usually place the concrete in that formwork slowly. We do about 4 feet at a time, okay? And the reason we do that is because we need to help it settle. We actually need to press it down, and we need to shake it together, or else we're going to have problems. This is actually the most important person on the concrete crew, is to actually use this thing called a stinger that vibrates, and we lower it down into the concrete, and we vibrate the concrete so that all of the air comes out of the concrete, and we will have no voids in the concrete. Because if we don't do that, if we just dump all of the concrete into the column, when we take off that form, we're going to have a whole bunch of voids. We're going to actually, they could be so bad that we could see the rebar in there. Okay, well, what does this mean? Well, it means there's a weakness in that column. Okay, if we don't settle that concrete, if we don't shake it, if we don't press it down in, if we don't get as much concrete into that column as we can, we're going to have weaknesses. Now, will that column hold up a bridge? Maybe. But what's going to happen when the floodwaters come? What's going to happen when the waves come? What's going to happen when the earth shakes? What's going to happen when things aren't perfect? Well, that column's going to come down. It's going to expose that weakness. That column's going to crumble, and that bridge is coming down. Now, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about your gifts that God has given you. Remember those talents and abilities and time and your heart and your love and your words and all those things God has given you to give away. I want you to think of those things like the concrete. Because we need to be generous with our gifts. Because if we don't be generous with those gifts, if we don't pack that column as densely as possible, okay? If we just throw it all in there, we just give what we can give, and we don't really worry about it, and we remove that form, we're going to have voids. And that's fine, because that bridge may last for a while, but guess what? When it's challenged, when that relationship that you've built that bridge to is challenged, that thing's coming down, okay? When you've built that bridge to the community, when you've built that bridge to your coworkers, if you haven't been generous with your gifts to them, that's coming down. Because we need to remember, it's our measure. We need to measure, and we need to shake it down. We need to press it down, and we need to have it be overflowing. That's what he asked us to do with our gifts. And so it makes absolute sense that we need to do that. About 2 years ago, me and Joy came up with this idea to build a little Airbnb on the side of our house. And we had a new neighbor at the time. Omar got to meet this neighbor quite a bit. So this new neighbor was not too thrilled about our little project, okay? So I came to regret ever giving this neighbor my cell phone number, because I got quite a few texts, and every time a text came through, I was like, oh, great. Here's another thing I'm going to have to smooth over, and it just became this real problem. Well, anyways, we finished the project, we get it done, and I thought everything was good. And then one day I come home and I look over to where their property's at, and I see this fence. This is not a normal fence. This is a stake in the ground with chains running like this between those stakes. And not just that, there was a no trespassing sign hung on every single area between each stake. So basically what this is like about 30 feet and about 6 no trespassing signs pointing directly at our house. So obviously, being the calm individual that I am, I walked over there to address the situation, and I said, so I take it you don't want us to trespass on your property. I said it something like that. Well, obviously this was really, really bothering me, and it made me pretty angry. And so I immediately went and got some what they call silt fence. It's just like solid, like fence and I put it up in front of it, and it kind of blocked it, but not really. But it still wasn't pretty. It was still pretty ugly, and because we were having people coming over, like people were going to be starting to use this place, and it was not good. Okay. And so I came up with a genius idea. Let me just preface this with, I'm a sinner, okay? And I know for all you saints out there, this is going to be rough. But I'm just a construction guy. So I came up with this genius idea. And I said, you know what? We haven't installed the light on the door, the little door light next to the door yet. And that light happens to point right towards their house. And if I could just find, maybe on Amazon or something, like the brightest spotlight that I could possibly find, like the Diamondback Stadium kind of spotlights, that I got to be able to buy one of those, right? And just install it right there. I could point it right at their bedroom window, right? And it's perfect. Genius idea. So I went inside to tell Joy about my genius idea. And I remember she was sitting at the counter, and I pulled up next to her, and I was like, Joy, I got a great idea. And I said, I can do one of two things. I said, I can buy the biggest, brightest spotlight that I can afford, and I can mount it, and I can point it straight at their window. Or I can pull out pull out a card and write a really nice note on it. And I can buy an expensive gift card to an expensive restaurant, stick it right in that card and put it in an envelope and write their address on it, and put a stamp on it and send it to them. And I was like, whoa, where'd that come from? I don't know. That wasn't from me. And I don't think Joyce said too much at that point, because I think sometimes she knows when to let God speak to me. And God spoke to me, and he said, yeah, you know the right answer here. And so that's what I did. It did take me a week or two to work up the courage to do this, but I got out the thank you card, and I wrote a nice note in there. I said, thank you for your patience during our construction project. You know, I'm looking forward to being great neighbors, you know, all these things, and bought this expensive gift card to an expensive restaurant, stuck it in that envelope, and wrote their address on it, put a stamp on it. I know they're right next door, but I'm mailing it, you know. We're going to take that extra step. And so I mailed it over, and I'm expecting that this is going to end up back on our doorstep in like a day or two when it gets over there. And I was like, me and Joy will have a nice dinner, you know. This will be great. You know, I tried. And so about a week passes, and I don't hear anything, and I'm like, God, I told you so. Seriously, just wasted all that money. You know, she's evil. She's just evil. But a couple days after that, I'm laughing because Omar's laughing because he knows. And so I look over, I pull up to the house, and I look over, and something's missing. The trespassing signs are gone. Yeah. And not only that, I walk over there, and she's in her front yard, and she flags me down. She says, thank you for the card. Thank you for the gift card. That, you know, that's so meaningful. And I was like, no problem. You know, I'm sorry for any. It actually was all my idea. Seriously. And so that was great. And then eventually the chain disappears. And then eventually, a very, very expensive, beautiful, white split rail fence shows up. And how much did they ask me to pay for it? $0. It was wonderful, okay? This is good. And I'm like, I when those trespassing signs disappeared, I ran in and I told Joy, I was like, we did it! We won! But anyways, generosity bridges gaps, okay? Generosity bridges gaps between you and people, between community and the church. Someday, she'll be in here. I know it, okay? Someday. And so generosity is the foundation for connection. Now, I want us to go back real quick to the passage in Luke 6. Okay, Luke 6:38, because I want to address another piece of it. It says, give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Okay, so the measure you use will be measured to you. And it will be poured into your lap. Okay, so if we continue with this metaphor about the column, then that means that God's going to pour a bunch of concrete into your lap, okay? And I was like, is that what it means, God? And he's like, that's exactly what it means, Rob, okay? Because guess what? When it comes to this metaphor of bridge building, because we're building bridges here at Bridge, when it comes to this, we are the formwork that holds God's blessing, okay? We are the formwork that has to be strong enough to hold God's blessing. You remember when I told you that the concrete, we only put it in there in 4-foot lifts? Because if we put it in and we just filled the whole thing up, you know what would happen? It would explode the bottom of the formwork because there would be too much liquid head pressure. Okay, it's called a blowout, and I've seen it happen on jobs all the time. It happened over at NAU. They filled up a formwork too fast. It blew out the bottom, okay, because there's just too much pressure It can't handle the pressure. And what happens when that happens? You just have to take the form off. You get all the concrete out of there, you break out the hose, and you spray it down. It's a complete waste of time and money and concrete. Okay, remember, I'm a sinner, not a saint. I've often asked God for millions of dollars. Anybody else ever done that? Okay, yeah. Like, God, if you give me $20 million, I will build a new church for Bridge on Milton Road. Yeah. And I'll retire and go fishing and hunting all the time, too. It'll be great. Yeah. It's a win-win, right? God, that's all we got to do. Have you ever wondered why God doesn't just allow Christians to win the lottery? You know, to just Christians to have all that blessing in their life. Well, I'll tell you, for me, my formwork's not strong enough to hold it yet. There's a reason that we are not overly blessed, overly quick. Because we need to build up that strength to hold God's blessing, okay? Because if he fills it up too quick, it's going to blow out and it's going to be worthless. It's all over the ground. It has zero worth at that point. He needs to know that we can actually handle it. Another verse I want to bring up to you, Luke 16:10, it says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever's dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. How do we make our formwork stronger? How do we show God that we're strong enough to handle his blessing? It's through stewardship. Stewardship of his blessing. And as he pours into us, okay, as he pours into us his blessing, the gifts that we then get to give, that we then get to give generously and build a bridge with, we just keep going up and up. You know how they pour? They pour 4 feet. And then they wait a little bit for it to solidify. Not all the way, but just enough. And then they pour 4 feet more. And then they wait a little bit, and then they pour 4 feet more. And eventually, you've got a column that can span the Colorado River. You've got a bridge that can go from one side to the other. But if they poured all of that at the same time, it would have been worthless. But when you stand back and you look at it and you say, man, that's incredible. And you look at those bridges and you're like, wow, that is awesome. It was 4 feet at a time. They didn't do it all at once. It took a long time. So what are you doing to steward God's blessing? And our point 3 is you gotta be a good steward. You gotta be a giver. You got to be generous, and you got to be a good steward with what God gives you if you want to build bridges, if you want to be the foundation for that connection. Be a good steward. In Matthew 25:14 through 30, I won't go there because it's a long parable, but it's the parable of the talents. And I want to summarize this parable for you. I encourage you to go back and read it on your own. But in this parable, a master calls in 3 servants. And to one of the servants, he gives 5 talents of gold. And that is like 5 lifetimes worth of gold. Okay, so this is a lot. And to the next one, he gives 2 talents. And to the next one, he gives 1 talent. And then he goes away, and the servant with 5 talents invests it and turns it into 10 talents. And the servant with 2 talents invests it and turns it into 4 talents, doubles it. And then the servant with 1 talent, he was afraid, and he buried it. He's like, I'm not going to lose any of this. I'm going to give him back 1 talent. And so when the master came back, he called all the servants in. And the first servant, who had turned 5 into 10, he told him, well done, good and faithful servant. He says, I just want to get this right. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. And then the one that comes in with 2 and turned it into 4, it wasn't 10, but he said the exact same thing. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. And then the one that came in with 1, because he was afraid and he had hidden it, he told that servant, he chastised him basically. And he said, give your talent to the servant who has 10. And then he kicked him outside. He was not a good steward of what the master had given him. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. I've entrusted you with few, but now I can entrust you with many. Because when I poured into you 4 feet, you were strong. You were able to handle that. You were a good steward. You used that to pour into other people, to build bridges for other people. You were faithful with it. Now I can give you 4 more. And then 4 more. And you can build an incredible bridge because of what God is doing in your life. You've got to be a giver. You've got to be generous. And you have to be a good steward of what God gives you, no matter whether that's 1 talent or 10. No matter whether that's $10 today in your bank account or $100,000 10 years from now. You've got to be the same steward. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you have a lot of time on your hands right now to volunteer or no time on your hands. You've got time. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to be a good steward of your time? What are you going to do with your words, with your wisdom? What are you going to do with your love? All these gifts God has given you to give away. What are you going to do? Are you going to be generous with those things? And are you going to be a good steward of those things? That's a question you got to ask yourself. Because if you want to be a bridge builder, you have to do that. You have to give. You have to be generous. And you have to be a good steward. Okay? Now, as you guys know, we have this thing called a bridge declaration. You guys remember that? Okay. Does anybody know what the first words of that are? Yeah, good. I hope that as we read this bridge declaration before we leave here tonight, that it holds new meaning for you. Because the first line of that and the last line of that implies generosity. Shaken together, pressed down, overflowing generosity that you need to give in order to be that bridge builder. Will you guys stand with me? I am so thankful for all of you tonight, that you came, that you showed up. God has a plan for you. God has a purpose for you. You have so many gifts that God has given you to be generous with. Go home, take inventory. Say, God, you've been faithful to me. What can I do for you? What can I do for others around me? How can I be generous this week?